Welcome to Alley 55 Customs. Today we are working on a 2004 Ford Mustang. It has the V6 engine, and the customer was stating that he had it wouldn't start. It was having a hard time starting. He took a long time for it to get it to fire up. So what I did was I went in and it sounded like it was a fuel related issue. So I checked the fuel pump, and it has great pressure coming out of the fuel pump. And so we are going to isolate it down to fuel injectors. So what I did was I actually purchased, and the guy did not want to put a whole lot of money into his car. So I did remanufactured OEM fuel injectors. And that is your fuel injector right there. Now, the bad part about it is, to replace the fuel injector, you're going to have to take off your intake manifold plenum. Your manifold, actually, your intake manifold is down below. This is like the plenum that actually ties into your intake manifold. So we do have to remove that. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to pull that off and take that whole unit right there and just remove it. And then we are going to take and replace your fuel injectors. Now, if you look, let me see if I can show you here. So your fuel injectors sit right down there. There's one right underneath there. Let's see back here. It's kind of hard to see. Let me go to the other side. Yep, so there's a good one right there. So there is your fuel injector. Let me see if I can get down in here. It's kind of hard to see it, but that is your fuel injector right there. There's one, and there's one right there. And it sits underneath the fuel rail and underneath this intake. So we do need to remove the intake to get to the fuel injectors. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and disconnect the intake. It's the cold air intake. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this off here, and down here we'll pull that off, and then just this whole thing will just come right out. All right, so the next thing you want to do is let's go ahead and take off the coil. Here's the thing with this. If you start pulling out your spark plug wires, number them. Make sure that you mark the wire to what cylinder it is going to, because you do not want to get these backwards. Your engine will run rough, misfire. So what I would do is I would keep these all together. Don't pull these off. Take the bolt out here, the one on the other side, disconnect the top clip. Then you can take this and just set it off to the side. And then there will be a couple of little like brackets up top here that hold the wires in place. You can just take and pull those right out. There's two of them, and just slide them to the back. You'll be good to go. So if you watch a bunch of my videos, you'll see me replacing the bolts where your studs, your bolts, nuts, whatever. I put them back in place. That way you don't have bolts, nuts laying around. You get them misplaced. You forget where the long bolt goes, the short bolt goes. So it's better that once you pull something off, stick them back in place. That way it takes the guesswork out of it. So the next thing we're going to do is let's lift out the PCV valve. If you haven't replaced the PCV valve in a while, it's a really good idea to do it right now. All right, so something else that is really crucial, I like to do this, that way you don't forget, but take pictures of the motor before you start tearing it down. Because here's the thing, once you start tearing it down, you forget where the wiring goes, you forget where vacuum lines go, hoses go. So the thing is, if you can take a ton of pictures, and then you can just go right back in, makes the job a little bit easier, and you can find out where each line runs. So if you take pictures, that's a foolproof way of putting everything back together. So, you know, you don't cross up your throttle lines. You know, there's just the routing of different wires where they go. This is the best way to do it, and the best way that I found that helps you out in the long run. Okay, so these are your throttle cables coming down. You want to disconnect those. So what I'm going to do is tilt this forward, and let's go here. And then what you have to do is pull your cable down, and then you have to slide it directly straight out. So let's see, there you go. So there is one of your throttle cables. The other one is just going to lift straight up, just like that. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is, instead of popping these out, I'm just going to unscrew these two bolts, and then just pull them straight out, replace the bolts back into here, and then we'll move on. All right, so I just decided to go ahead and slip them back through. It actually was easier. Normally these things are pretty stuck on there, and I usually just take the two bolts off, but these actually popped off pretty easy. So go ahead, push in the two tabs on the side, and then you just push it through. Same on this one here. You just push in the two tabs right here. There's one here and one on the bottom, and then you just push that through. Okay, so now I'm just going to start disconnecting stuff like your vacuum lines. Get those out of the way. I'm going to go through and take off your, you know, all your pigtails, your clips here. There's one here. There's one right here. So anything that is going to get in the way of that intake coming off, you need to take it off. So this is going to be a hindrance. So, you know, go ahead and pull these out. This one down here, same thing. Go ahead and pull that out, and you know, and just work your way around finding different things. Here's, you know, you can probably keep these on, but because if you can flip this out of the way, that's not a bad idea. Here's this, you know, you can sit there and pull that out. So there's a lot of different things that you need to disconnect. I mean, use judgment on what you pull off and what you don't. The other thing too is, don't forget your spark plug. These are your wire loom adapters. So go ahead and just pull those up, set them off to the side. Once again, these here, set it off to the side. So now that's out of the way. Now, after you get all these disconnected, then you can go ahead and start breaking free the bolts. So you've got these here. These are the ones that you're going to be focusing on. So you've got like this one here, 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 and then so on and so forth as you work back. You got two in the top right here that have to come out, and there's one right here, one right here, and then you should be able to lift off this whole plenum. This whole thing should just come right off. And you'll know if you didn't disconnect something. Not too difficult, kind of easy. It's a little more involved, but let me show you a little bit more as I go. Okay, now that we got everything pretty much disconnected, we did have one wire. This is your PCV valve. This is the line that comes into your PCV valve. It snapped off. It's just something that happens. You know, this is an old vehicle, 2004. So you're going to get stuff like this. So you either need to replace this line or fix it. I'll show you a fix that I usually use. I'll do that at the end of the video. But go ahead and now start to break these bolts, get them undone, and then you're going to be using an 8mm, and just start pulling those out. Okay, so now as you remove these bolts out of here, so you got like these here, and then you've got longer ones that go in the back. Here's two more. Here's one here. Here's one here. I highly recommend that because they're just different sizes. The lengths and stuff are different. So to make it easy, take a piece of cardboard and then mark where your front of your engine is, and then go ahead and do your bolt pattern. So you've got 1, 2, 3 bolts there. So now I've got your 1, 2, 3 bolts there, and then the 2 there will be your back 2 here. And then your long ones, you'll put, further back. But, just take a pen or Sharpie and just write it out. That way, it takes the guesswork out of it. So when you're putting it back together, all you do is pop these things out, slide them in there, and torque them down, and you're good to go. All right, so here is the end result. This is how your bolt pattern is. So then when you go ahead and put it back together, you're putting it back the exact same way that you took it out. So if you look at it, some of the bolts are longer, some of the bolts are shorter. You won't have any issues then putting it back together. So now that we've taken everything off, the bolts are out, all the wiring's disconnected, that plenum should just pull right up. Okay, so now the last thing too is you're gonna have to take off one bolt, swing this out of the way, because there is another bolt straight down right here. So don't forget that. And then basically, once you're done and completed, this whole thing, see that, will just lift right up. So you are loose and ready to go to just pull that thing out. So let me go ahead and pull it out, and I'll touch base with you in a second. Okay, so we got her out, super easy to do. Here's the final result here. So we've got, there you go. Now, when you put it all back together, you do want to clean these surfaces, the mating surfaces, and then you have a gasket that needs to go down on top of that. And I'll show you all that here in just a second. Okay, so here is your old intake gasket, and here's the new one right here. It's a genuine Ford OEM part. That is your part number that you're going to need for your intake. So here's the new gasket, and what you're going to do is you're just going to flip it over, make sure that it is the right one, make sure everything fits, that all your holes line up, and it looks like it's the correct one. So there you go. So now you can go ahead and throw away your old one now that you have your new one in place. All right, so now your next step is to take off your fuel rail, because here are your fuel injectors. They're all right here underneath your fuel rail. So what you need to do is there's going to be 4 bolts. So here's one right here. There'll be one right here at the very bottom. So right here. There's going to be one on this side here. Let's go to the other side. So right down here, there's another one right here. And right in the very back, there's another one right down here at the very bottom here. So then you take those 4 bolts out, pull up on this fuel rail, it'll lift right up, and then you can go ahead and replace your fuel injectors. Okay, now to remove these bolts right here, you're going to be using an 8mm socket. That's what the bolt is going to look like. Here's the other thing too is you may want to put a rag or something over top of the openings here to your intake manifold, because if you don't and you drop one of these screws down in there, bolts down in there, you're going to be doing a lot more work than you want to do. So I highly recommend just covering that up with a rag, a piece of cardboard, something. Okay, so now the easiest way is to, basically I took off, the wiring harness was attached here. You got a couple other clips like over here, this actually was still attached. So if you do that, you can actually just lift this whole thing right out and flip it over just like so. And now you have full access to all your fuel injectors, and there you go. So there's all your fuel injectors. Right there, there, and there. So now I will show you how to take these out. Okay, so to pop these out, you have a circlip, see it right there. You have 2 tabs that are holding it in. You need to just basically pull out on these, and then you can actually pull off on one side, take the other, and pull it out, and it just pops right out. You do need to take these off of the old fuel injector and put it on the new one. Now I highly recommend that you match everything up, set it side by side, make sure it is exactly the same, that you have the same hookup, your Your O-ring is up top here. Everything is right in place, and you know, you got your O-ring. Now there's a little bit of difference in the depth here, but that should be fine. That's the newer style fuel injector for this model of Mustang. And one of the biggest things you want to make sure is that these two will line up and everything. So you got your two prongs and the connector's correct, yes. And I went with just a tad bit different style of fuel injector. It's a more high volume, so it's going to look a little bit different. But if you get stock OEM, it is going to be, you know, it should be the exact same. But again, this one's a little bit more high volume, so it's going to look a little bit different. And let's get underway on installing. All right, so the easiest way to get this to pry off of here is just to take like a slip joint plier, a Nipex, and then you just take and you grab a hold of the side and it just pops right out. Super easy to do. These do need to go back on the new one, so we'll go ahead and install that onto the new one. Now the old one, sometimes the company that you go through to get the new fuel injector will ask for a core. And so what you do is you take all 6 of these fuel injectors and send them back to the manufacturer, and they usually give you like 15, 20 bucks back. So, but in this case, they didn't ask for that, so I'm just going to throw them in the garbage. All right, to install your circlip onto the actual fuel injector, it's relatively easy. You just take it like so, and then what you're going to do is just take it and pop it into place. And what I was talking about is if you take a pair of like Nipex or slip joint pliers, you just take it like this, and then you pull it in, and then you take this side here, and then you brace it without too much resistance. And then what you're going to do is just pull this dude in like that, and there you go. So now the circlip is on there and it's ready to go. Okay, so here is your final product. You have this all seated down. You want to push it down in place and get these 2 clips on each side of the circlip to lock in. And once it's down, it's not moving. The other thing too is you want to have it kind of angled. So if you look at your old ones that came out of here, it's got a slight angle to it. So you want to also match that. Now these are a higher flow, so it does look a little bit different than this one. So if you look at it, it's slightly different. But we're just going to go ahead and go ahead and start taking off the rest of them and replace them with the new ones. Okay, here's number 2. To take the circlip off, like I was showing you, the best way I found is just to take the to go in here and grab a hold here like this, and then what you're going to do is you just pull back. See how it already popped it off? And then you just take this side here, and then you lock it on like this point here to here, and there you go. That's the best way to take these circlips off, and then go ahead and pop it in place on the next one. All right, so the other thing too that I want to point out, if these are not going down correctly, they're having a hard time seating down, you can take a little bit of WD-40 and spray around that O-ring, and then that usually just slides in, seats really well. But so far I haven't had any issues, so I'm just going to keep on going, and once I get all 6 done, I'll get back to you. Okay, so now I've got all 6 of them in, all the 6 of the fuel injectors are in. What you want to do is double check to see that these things are seated down. Everything is locked in place, because you want to make sure that everything is seated correctly right here. You got your tabs over the top here locked in place. Excuse me. And so on and so forth. So this is pushed down, ready to go in. And now all you have to do is flip this back over now that you're satisfied with what you've done. Then what you need to do is go ahead and flip this back over, and you're going to lock it down into these spots here. So you got one there, one over here. I'd go through, look, here's like some debris. You know, you don't want that in there. It's not a bad idea to go through, take some WD-40, spray it down, clean it up, wipe it up before you stick everything back in. It just makes good practice. You know, you're putting in new fuel injectors, you know, clean up the surfaces that you're gonna mate up with the new fuel injector. Okay, so now that we're ready to install the fuel injectors, let's go ahead and clean off the intake manifold. What you wanna do is you wanna spray it down with some WD-40. That's a great cleaner. Don't worry about if it gets down inside the ports. It's not that big of a deal. And then you're going to use just a nice little wire brush. And then you just go over it, clean it off, and then take a rag and then wipe it off. And you're done. Do that to the other side of the manifold and hit that side also, just so it seats better. You know, you got a brand new gasket that's going to go in between. And but you just want the mating surfaces smooth and flat so it locks down better. Okay, now that we're going to go ahead and start installing the fuel rail, you've got all your let's tweak this one over a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now you have all your fuel injectors in, your fuel rails on, everything's cleaned up. You can go ahead and start to seat this down. So let's just go ahead and pop it in place. So what you want to do is line it up. Okay, make sure, it's like, oh, there, look at that. So there is something that you do not want that to go down the side of your engine. Almost looks like a rock. So that's why you double check. Yeah, something. Looks like a seed. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you wanna just double check to make sure there's nothing that's gonna fall down inside before you lock everything down. One of the biggest things is do not drop anything in these ports. If you do, you're gonna be taking off this intake manifold. A little bit more in-depth job. But anyways, let's go ahead and seat those things down and then we will lock it in place. Okay, so now I got it all seated down. You'll actually kind of feel them click in place. That's your O-ring seating. So if you push down on each one of these, you'll feel them lock in place. And then once it's locked in place, just go around, double check, make sure that everything is exactly where you want it. And the other thing too is make sure your bolt holes are all lined up, which they are. So now I can go ahead and lock this down in place. So okay, so now that you've installed your fuel rail and you've put your bolts back in all the way around on all four sides, then go ahead and start hooking up your electrical connection. You're gonna push down on the connector and it will lock in place. You'll feel it click, you'll hear it click. And once it's in place, you're good to go. So get all 6 of those done, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, so every once in a while you'll run into this problem. I'm kind of glad that it happened. I can show you how to fix this. So one of these clips, actually the push tab broke off. And it's very common when you have a vehicle that's, you know, pretty much 20 years old. So with that clip being broke off, you can't seat it down. It won't lock into place. So wire tie becomes your best friend. Now, the other option that you do have, which I'm going to do this for this customer, is I'm going to go down and buy a new clip. You know, a new connector. It's a pigtail is what this is called. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna cut it off and then you're gonna re-splice the wires here, and then you'll have a brand new locking you know, mechanism. But I'm gonna show you how to fix it without using a new pigtail. So if you put it in place and get it down, you can take a wire tie. You can find these at your local hardware store, and go ahead and you feed it down through the spot that normally has the tab that locks in place. I just had one break, that's all. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that thing and you're gonna push it down, And then you're gonna grab it from the other side and you're gonna bring it down and you're gonna wrap it up around and then you're gonna cinch it in place. A lot of times what I like to do is I like to take it through the 2 wires. If you can make it through the 2 wires, if not, even just going around it like that so it holds it down. Cinch it up, and then what it'll do is it'll put pressure down and hold it in place. Not my ideal thing, but it gets you by in a pinch. I've seen people do this and they've had them in place for years. So, but for the customer, I'm not gonna do this. I just wanna show this to you, but I'm gonna cut the wire. I'm gonna put in a brand new pigtail for the customer. That's the way I work. So at least that's a good fix. Okay, before we go ahead and install the plenum here, we do need to just spray it down. Like I said, by the time it's installed and you're ready to fire it up, this is all going to be dry. So if it gets inside, not a huge ordeal. It won't damage it. It actually is not bad for it. And then go ahead and just start to scrub this stuff off. You know, get it as clean as you possibly can. That way it seats a little bit better. Sometimes it takes a little bit. There's more gunk on some of it. Sometimes you can take like a scraper if you have a lot of buildup, which I may end up doing this because right here is some extra buildup. So I might just take like a paint scraper, X-Acto knife or something, just to kind of scrape that edge off and then wipe it down, get it clean so it mates better. Okay, so after you spray it down really good, you know, you can use like a paint scraper. This one's a little bit big, but use a smaller paint scraper to get in there. Do not gouge the metal. This is aluminum, so you do not want to gouge this. But go ahead and clean it up as best as you possibly can. The gasket will fill in a lot of the imperfections. You do not need to use anything like an RTV or anything to seal it down. The gasket is more than enough for this. So when you put your gasket down and you put your intake on top of it, just align it, drop your bolts in, and torque it down to the manufacturer's spec. Okay, so now that everything is clean, you can go ahead and reinstall your gasket. Now there's alignment. See here. So you've got like this here. This is an alignment tab right here, and there's another one right up in the very front also. So when you put your intake manifold back on, it's going to line right up. Takes the guesswork out of it. It keeps the gasket from shifting from side to side. So this is the way you want to do it right here. Should come with these. See how it has the red around here, different colors a lot of times. Go ahead and put this to the upward side, and we'll go ahead and install the manifold. Okay, so the next thing that I would do before you go ahead and cinch everything down, put your bolts back in, don't do that quite yet. Go through and hook up all your lines, like your vacuum line. If this gets down underneath the plenum, if you do that and you start to torque this down, get it seated down, guess what? It's not gonna, you'll find out really soon when you're gonna go hook up your line. You won't have a line to hook up. It's gonna be stuck underneath there. And then guess what? You have to redo everything. You have to take all the bolts back out just to get this line out. So go ahead and hook everything back up, wire loom back in, hook up all your connections, get your vacuum lines hooked up, you know, everything in place. You know, just go around, click everything in, you know, vacuum lines, here's 2 more here, and just make sure that everything is put back in place. Nothing else is underneath the manifold. If your manifold rocks back and forth, then you probably have some kind of an obstruction. So make sure that that's out of the way. And then once you feel that it's suffice, then go ahead and start putting in your bolts, and we'll do the torque specs and all that stuff in just a second. Okay, now that we've put in the plenum, the upper intake manifold, what you're gonna do is go ahead and start putting in your bolts, and then just get them hand tight. Don't tighten them down because you have to do them in a sequence so the manifold get snugged down correctly. If you don't, it'll walk on you, so it'll open up on one side, or it'll be just an incorrect. You might have a leak on one side or the other. So what you want to do is you want to go, like, you start here. So this is the front of the motor. So you're going to go number one. You're going to take that one and you're going to run it down, and you're going to torque it. Now I'll tell you what the torque specs here are in a minute. And then you're going to go to 2, and then over to 3, and then back up to 4, to 5, to 6, to 7, to 8, to 9, to 10, back to 11, and down to 12. And that's what you're going to be, you got to go in that order. This is the manufacturer's specifications. Now, I printed this all off for you guys. So that is, so if you have a 2004 like this one, this is what you're going to do. So the first step going through, as you're torquing all of them, it's going to be 89 inch-pounds. And then once you get done hitting them up with 89 inch-pounds all the way around, you go through and hit them up again with an additional 90-degree turn. All right, so now that you got your bolts down hand tight, what you're going to do now is you're going to go through and start the torque sequence. So here's what you're going to be using is a 1/4 inch torque wrench, and that is in inch-pounds, not in foot-pounds. So you want it in inch-pounds because it's calls for 89 inch-pounds. If you do it in foot-pounds, you'll break the bolts. So 89 inch-pounds. So make sure that you have a torque wrench that is in inch-pounds. Okay, so we're going to start with number 1, which is right there, and that is going to be dead center right here. And so what we'll do is we're going to go through, there we go, until it clicks. There we go. There's 1, and then we'll move on over to number 2, which is right across. Okay. Here, let's do this until it clicks. There you go. And then we're just going to keep on following the sequence, the pattern, until all these bolts are 89 inch-pounds. Okay, now that you got everything torqued down to the 89 inch-pounds, the next step is to do an additional 90-degree turn. So you're just going to take it and go an additional 90 degrees. So like that right there. And that's it. So use the same sequence. Use the same sequence, which is the first one. And so what you're going to do is just do 90 degrees. And then you're going to do all your bolts all over again. And then once you hit the 90 degrees on each one of them, the intake or the plenum is tight enough. Okay, when you're done torquing, the other thing I want to show you really quick is anytime you're using a torque wrench, you never want to leave it set. You always want to spin it back out. So bring it out. Let me show you here real quick. And what you're going to do is you're going to spin this back out so it bottoms out back down to 0, because there's a spring inside there, and if you leave the tension on it, then the spring actually will weaken, and so you want to run it back out to relieve the tension on the spring. Then you can put it away. So just like this here. So I just ran it all the way back down, and now it's bottomed out completely, and now I can put it away. Okay, our next step is to install your coil, and let's get that put back in place. Make sure all your connectors are hooked up. Just go through and just double check everything. You got your throttle cables that you need to still hook up. Throttle bracket right here needs to get hooked back in. Your PCV valve, the hose, coming off of it is broken. I am going to replace this, but I will show you a fix if you have to get by in a pinch, and I'll do that here in a few minutes. Okay, another thing too is don't forget to hook this up. This actually goes on the bottom screw of your coil pack. So go ahead and just mount that up to the bottom. It'll mount in like this on the side. So go ahead and do that and hook up your connector. Okay, so the socket was a 7mm to tighten up your coil pack. And then you want to use an 8mm for your throttle bracket. So now you can go ahead and start installing your throttle lines. Easy, you just pop it like here. And then what you're gonna do is just pop it in. And there you go, you're locked in. Okay, now this here, you're just gonna take it, pop it down until it locks. And then this one here, you're taking it up and over, right down in here. And then you're going to pull that down and you're gonna hook it in. Hopefully I can do it with one hand. Yeah, there we go, got it. And there you go, just like that. So then on your response, you know, see it's pulling straight up. So that is done there. Now we're just gonna deal with the PCV valve and its hose, and we should be done and ready to fire it up. So the other thing too is just go over it again one more time and make sure that all your lines are hooked up, that you have nothing that is disconnected. All right, so I'm gonna show you how to do just a really quick repair on your PCV valve. I installed the PCV valve, and if you remember, the line was broken here. A real quick fix. This is something that I do not pride myself in doing, but this will get you by in a pinch. So if you have to get the car back on the road, you need to drive it, this is what you want to do here. And you just get a piece of rubber hose and then slide it over the top of both sides, slide them in, and then it's got to have a good fit. If it's tight to get in there, go ahead and spray a little WD-40 in there and it'll help slide in both sides. I will not keep it this way. I'm just showing you this for the video. I will change this out for the customer because I have the original one available, and so I'm going to get that changed out. So if you like the video, please subscribe. We have a ton of videos coming up. I'm doing some giveaways. Hit that like button and have a good day.